we're going to actually give you a chance to start by starting with just a connecting activity first to get us going. This is definitely something you could adapt to your classes if you would like to. So think about something that you enjoyed or appreciated last week. Don't say what it is right now. Just think about something that you enjoyed or appreciated last week. It can be professional or not professional. I mean, you have to remain professional, but the thing you enjoyed can be professional or personal. Okay. And now, if people are willing to do so, as one person shares, whoever goes first, it doesn't matter to me. The rest of us are going to listen to what they're sharing. And if we feel a potential connection to our own appreciation, then we're going to go next. And we're not only going to share our appreciate, whatever it is that we appreciate, but we're going to be sure to say how it's connected to the previous person who spoke and use their name, right? There's that hashtag say my name. So use their name. Okay. So would someone like to go first?
I go first.
Go ahead.
Oh, Karina, you go.
No,
first.
Makiko, go ahead.
Oh my God. Okay. We appreciate it. Just a small group of friends, because this is a really hard time to connect with the other people, and we can't just freely go out and meet people. So I really have a really comfortable core friend that we don't have to worry about it, and we have dinner together, and I just really appreciate those very close moments that as a really good friend.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Does anyone's appreciation connect to that in any way? I can go. I actually had an opportunity last week as well. For those of you who know me, you know I'm really good friends with someone named Christine Lanfear, and we actually saw each other in person. And I did appreciate that. We sat outside, across our cars from each other to maintain our 6 feet of distance out. We went through the drive-through at Starbucks separately in our own cars, got our drinks, and then stood outside in the parking lot and talked for like 2 hours, just standing across the hood from each other, so that we could be sure we were being safe. And yeah, I appreciated that even with things starting to lock down again, it's not like they're not locked down. They're not locking down. They're not closing. They're having to modify how they do business, but I can do something simple like, go to Starbucks and still be safe about doing so. And I appreciate that. Searching for connections.
Well, not exactly the same.
That's okay.
But I last week was super appreciative of my husband, having somebody else, because I get migraines, and it was a really bad, really bad, 2 weeks with migraines, and he has been wonderful. So I appreciate all his help. I also appreciate having healthcare and being able to go to the doctor and to feel better.
Absolutely.
Yes.
That's good.
Absolutely. And Makiko, I forgot to say your name because I was connecting to yours and sharing with the friend. I forgot to do that.
Okay.
But I feel so much for those who, like you, Karina, who suffer from migraines. I can't even begin to imagine what that must be like. I just hear the most awful horror stories from people who have them, and it just, it's just awful.
2 weeks.
Oh, God, that's just
awful. Yeah.
I don't know if I would make it. I really am a wuss. I have absolutely zero tolerance for pain or most discomfort. So
me too. Plus,
you're very strong, Karina.
So,
you're strong, Karina.
It was combination of being able to have a very supportive husband and being able to have access to healthcare. It's just being, we take it for granted. It's just being a blessing.
Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
yeah.
We haven't heard from Nick or Sheila yet. I realize you may not have a direct connection, but would you like to share something you appreciated last week?
Well, yes, for me, very similar to Karina, not that I had a headache, luckily I've been okay, but it's having my husband home. He was able to cook, because I've got 2 kids that are homeschooling from the house.
Yeah.
So I have many computers. Many times I'm teaching my high school kids and I'm trying to help my seven-year-old connect. It's been quite the challenge, but just having someone else to take care of the house, take care of the family and myself, it's been very, very good. So I'm very grateful for that, for his companionship and just helping, just being at home.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'll piggyback off Sheila there. So I enjoyed yesterday off, and my wife was with me, and so she had yesterday off, and it was nice because being together, but also we got to commiserate. This is so weird having Wednesday off in the middle of the week.
Yeah.
It's like, and we talked about it feels like Saturday in the morning, but then Sunday in the evening. But it was nice having someone there going through it with me at the same time. We just
That's awesome.
Enjoy it and commiserate that it was so weird at the same time.
That is weird. That is awesome. Yeah, I definitely enjoyed it. I took full advantage of that.
And then we have tomorrow off as well, which is fantastic. I can't believe it.
Yeah, I definitely enjoyed that because, for elementary, it's actually a work day. It's non-instructional, but it's a work day. For you, it's just non-instructional. So yeah, definitely dig into that relaxation time. Don't worry about emailing anyone from the district office. We are not off. So if something comes up and you need to email us, we will be there. So we're going to hop. Well, actually, first of all, I was just curious, depending on the classes you teach, did you see a possibility for a simple activity like this, or are you already doing something kind of like this with your classes just as one way to kind of get them starting to talk?
I do something like this only for one of my classes. It is my Spanish 4. I have, I have 28 students, which is, a really nice small class.
Good.
These are kids that, are normally juniors and seniors, so they know each other and they know me. So there's that trust that I don't have to try to build through Zoom because most of the students already know each other. Like we all know each other. So it's easier. I tried to do this with Spanish 1 and it's just like, it just didn't go anywhere. No. Yeah, no. I'm very unfortunate. But yeah.
And that shows the importance of those connections and how hard you're all working to help students make those connections. But no matter how hard you're working at it, it's definitely more difficult than it would have been if we were in a classroom, right? Yes. So there were some successes, definitely, at least I hope, right? There are some times where I'm hearing where kids are becoming friends who've never met in person still, and starting to feel connections to each other. But for a lot of kids, it's really difficult to feel connected. And so trying to do an activity like this is hard. Sometimes a question like this can help because it's not necessarily about school. It's just something they appreciated, which also means it doesn't tie into, hopefully it doesn't go as much in, it doesn't require students to have had certain kinds of experiences or securities or privileges, because virtually in almost any situation, right, you can find something in your life that you could appreciate, even if you're experiencing hard times for whatever reason, hopefully. But you're right. It's definitely a challenge. I hope it went well with your year 4 classes where they feel more connected.
Yes.
Yeah, that makes sense. So I think we all know this, but you know me, I always find it important to start by okay, come on. Sorry, I'm still trying to learn how to do this, show a certain part only. So what is interpersonal communication? Come on now. You actually know the answer. Don't worry. It's not a test.
Well, one thing that I remember is it has to be spontaneous.
It does have to be spontaneous. Very good. Is it one-way or two-way communication?
Two-way.
Two-way. two-way communication, spontaneous. We'll talk a little bit more about some of the specifics in a moment. Can you tell me what you have already tried in terms of getting your students, especially in this situation with distance learning, what have you already tried in terms of trying to get your students participating in interpersonal activities? Anybody can start.
Well, so I am teaching 2 levels. I think for us language teachers, the levels that we teach are critical on the things that we can do with our students, right?
That is true.
So,
yes.
Because I am teaching levels 1 and level 4, these classes are completely different, and what
They
I can
sure
do in
are.
my class is completely different. And regarding interpersonal communication, is I don't have, because of the reasons that I have said that I have explained before. I am able to put these kids into breakout rooms and have them talk about their weekend, talk about their weekend plans, use different tenses, right? And it is perfectly fine. But with Spanish one, no, this is what I'm here for.
Good. Okay, good. I hope some of the things we'll talk about today will
I got
help,
nothing.
right? I hope some of the things we talk about today will give you some ideas, including things others have tried. Did anybody else want to share something that they've tried or?
Well, so I have only a Spanish one, Karina.
Okay.
Yes. So at the very beginning, I have mostly freshmen. So I was very, worried because they don't know me and they're also very new to high school.
Yeah.
So something that I did, and I'm gonna try it again. I did it in September, the first Friday. So I told them to bring their, I think I call it like fur ball babies, so they can bring their pets.
Yes.
And for the first time, many of them showed their faces.
Yes.
And they're little puppies or cats. So some of them had like a lizard. So that was a great activity. We didn't use Spanish. We did English. Yeah. But I have also my dogs. So it was a great, opportunity to build a community.
I love that.
Yeah. So
that is awesome.
And what's cool is now that it's been a bit longer, you could ask them again to bring their pets, but you could give them some sentence frames like introduce your pet to us, remind us, como se llama.
¿Cuántos años tiene?
Thank you. I was like, ¿cuántos años? I got the años. I couldn't remember the cuántos. Tiene. Yeah. Like, I can't remember my soy and, Sarah Star, but one of those is he or she nice? Mm-hmm. Right. Like you can prompt them so they can, for about 20 seconds can, talk to each other about their pets and so on. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I love that. And they'll be like, we get to bring our pets again. What did you do for those who don't have pets, just out of curiosity?
So one of my classes, I have 36 kids, which is a big class. So not everybody participated, to be honest.
Right.
But at least I got to see their faces, at least 20 kids, which to me was good. So some of them are quiet. They don't talk much in general. They just don't talk.
I mean, you could always say, bring a pet or something else you really care about and would like to show us. That way, if they don't have a pet, they can still bring something.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Absolutely. Okay. So bear with me while I get this right. I'm just trying to play with this feature that I'm learning. All right. So some hallmarks are interpersonal. You already shared a couple. So they are spontaneous two-way interactions and they occur with a purpose, right? It's not just two people, talking at each other without any recognition of the other person's presence, right? There's actually a purpose to what it is that they are sharing. There's something that they want to do. So the way some people, it won't go any smaller, it looks like. So for example, they want to share information. So they're having a spontaneous two-way conversation or a text messaging conversation, which would still be interpersonal, particularly since, as we all know, I'm sure you've experienced like I do, you don't always remember to proofread your text before you send them. You just type and send, and then you look at it and see all the problems. Or if you're like me, I talk to my phone and I dictate my texts, and I also dictate entire emails. And I have finally learned I must read them all the way through before I hit send, because boy, sometimes what it comes up with is not correct. So one of the purposes for these interactions is to share information. Another reason people engage in these two-way spontaneous opportunities is to share reactions that they have to something. Obviously a common topic just right now is reactions to the coronavirus, reactions to the election, reactions to the news that Sacramento just moved back to purple and Placer just moved back to red. So these interactions, it's part of our connection with people. And one of the things we crave doing is sharing how we react and how we feel about things and what our opinions are of things. The other really super important feature of interpersonal communication is that all the parties involved, whether it's 2 people, 3 people, or 10 people engaged in this conversation, they have to actively work to negotiate meaning. In other words, during this conversation, if it's oral or during a text messaging group message chat thing, if there's a question or a need for clarification, the person who doesn't understand actually has to negotiate meaning and say, wait, am I understanding you correctly? Did you mean da-da-da or did you mean da-da-da? And that's a really important feature of interpersonal. So we want to give our students little sentence frames and chunks of vocabulary they can use to practice negotiating for meaning, even at a very early stage, even if that's just asking them to repeat. Giving them the chunk, I don't understand, repeat that, please, is their initial way that they know how, right? That signals to the person that was speaking to them. If I'm talking to you and you tell me, I don't understand, could you repeat that? As the person who's speaking, I have to think about that and go, wait, did I phrase it badly? Or is it possible maybe that this other person doesn't have the experience or the language knowledge to understand what I'm saying? Do I need to change how I said it? Will that help the meaning get across? And now I'm involved in negotiating meaning as well, because I'm trying to help the other person understand. Now at year 1, they don't have a lot of other ways to say things, right? So again, they're going to at first just learn the chunk for, I don't understand, can you repeat? And the other person repeats and hopes it works. We start teaching them that sometimes those breakdowns in communication occur for very simple reasons. It could be something as simple as your pronunciation that is causing the other person to not understand you. Maybe every single word is correct, but your pronunciation is so incorrect that others are like, yeah, I don't know what you said. Could you repeat that? But they have to actively negotiate meaning. So I think we've already covered, I'm going to actually skip that part, but ideas to try. So what I'm going to do is share some things that, some of them are things I've used in classes. Some of them are things that came from other teachers. In fact, a couple of the things come from other teachers in our district. So you may recognize some of them. And I'm kind of focusing on things to try and how to adapt them for distance learning. So they might be activities you normally were doing in a classroom setting with students live, and you totally knew how to run that game. That was your, right? That was your kingdom. You knew how to make this happen with kids in the room with you. But I think there are a lot of things that we can still do in distance learning, even if it does require some modification, because we're trying to get kids to the point where they can speak spontaneously, respond to questions, ask their own questions, check their understanding and make sure it's okay, share a feeling, share a reaction, right? During a conversation, they're not just pretending they're listening by looking at the speaker, but they're actually appropriately interjecting something like, wow, oh, that's awesome, right? And so you want to teach those little chunks as well, so that they have a little set of like 4 chunks that they can call on during a conversation to react appropriately, whether they should show empathy and like, oh, I'm sorry, right? That sounds horrible. Or they should show excitement, or they should show gratitude. You give them 4 little chunks, right, of phrases they can use. So we want to look at some ideas, and I am going to switch to, I'm going to stop share and reshare just because I still think I prefer my old way of doing it, but I wanted to play with that other way. So I'm going to go back to my normal sharing because I like present mode better. But now you know there's another thing. So one thing we want to talk about is breakout rooms. And I think probably all of you have tried to put your kids in breakout rooms. You're probably still putting kids in breakout rooms. I just want to talk through some kind of pro tips for getting the most you can out of a breakout room, because it's a great tool And it's one of the best things we have available for interpersonal. We have to be honest, right? I think it was Sheila who was saying she has classes of 36. And you can't realistically do decent interpersonal communication with all of them in the main room at the same time. So we really need to use those breakout rooms. Do remember there's a couple of really, really important limitations on breakout rooms. There's 3 actually, really important limitations that you might have already experienced. Students on Chromebooks have to join with what's called the browser link. That's not necessarily just clicking on the link in your Google Classroom. It's something, you know, when you open up Zoom from someone else's link and it says, do you want to open zoom.us? And you say yes. They don't want to open the Zoom app on their Chromebook if there's a breakout room. They have to instead look for the tiny little blue print. It's tiny and it's lower on the page and it says join with browser link. It is a more limited experience in Zoom in terms of the ability to do reactions and things. But if they are on a Chromebook, it is the only way they can go to a breakout room. The Zoom app for Chromebooks does not allow them to go to a breakout room. That might be why you've had some kids, if this has happened to you, say that I know you keep saying you've put me in a breakout room, but I don't see an invitation and I can't go. And it's because of a limitation on Chromebooks. Well, a Zoom problem with Chromebooks. The other thing to know about breakout rooms, no matter how your settings are configured, right? Literally, no matter how your settings are configured, once they go into a breakout room, every single feature is available to them. Chat is available, screen sharing is available, annotation on screens is available. So while we recognize that breakout rooms are a really important tool for interpersonal communication, know also that it's really important for you to try to keep popping in on those rooms and use some of the other tips I'm about to share, because unfortunately students have a lot of tools at their disposal to make some really poor choices with what they say and do and share in those breakout rooms. I'm sorry to say, and there's nothing you can do to turn that off. It is a feature of Zoom that the assumption is if you put people in breakout rooms, you want them to be able to communicate fully and share fully, no matter what your settings are. So that was just something I like to remind people whenever I'm talking about breakout rooms. A couple other tips to make the breakout rooms even more successful. Make sure you give a very specific task. It should be contextualized and meaningful, meaning that they know before they go in there, the context or the setting that this exact same conversation would occur in the world outside of our classrooms. And that there's a reason for them to be talking. There's, it's not like a script or a patterned response where everybody already knows all the answers. That's not spontaneous two-way communication, and it's not interpersonal. It might be practice for something. It might be very early stages of guided practice that eventually will make it possible for them to do interpersonal, but it's not true interpersonal. It needs to be tied to learning targets. I think as a team, our world language teachers are really good at this, but I just like to reiterate that all the time. Often it should be connected to previous learning. It builds from it. It's connected to it. It requires them to use skills. We know this about language. They don't get to forget anything ever. Everything they learn eventually comes back around to haunt them. And then they wish they remembered that thing. If they're in year 4, they're like, oh my God, there's that thing we did in French 1, right? And they still need it. Like it doesn't get to go away. They'll still need it. And any helpful supports that will help them be successful at this task you've given them to do in the breakout rooms are identified to them and available to them. Meaning, if sentence frames are going to be helpful, you either gave them a link to a document with sentence frames before sending them to the breakout rooms, or you put it in your Google Classroom ahead of time, or you had them create a graphic organizer ahead of time that was going to help them participate in this conversation. And then you remind them before they go to the breakout room, remember that graphic organizer I had you complete? Take that out now. You're going to need that for this conversation. It's going to help you be successful. So anything that will help them be successful, we want to remind them what it is, where it's located, and how they will use it. You want to try to provide activities that make it clear that there is some group support available to them just through the peers that are with them in their classes or in their breakout room, but there's still individual accountability as well. And we know as teachers, that's a really fine line, right? It's the big bear of all group work. Making it the whole group is working together, and yet we need each member of the group to also be accountable for having contributed to the success of that particular experience. You can do this in a couple of ways. You can provide structures through which group members give feedback to each other about their participation in the conversation. Before you do that, you should definitely have done some norming and coming to agreements with your students around how this works. Maybe you provide them a rubric, they use specific language from the rubric only, along with maybe a specific example from the person who spoke to say, when you said da-da-da, I really liked how that showed that you know the vocabulary from this chapter. Or when you said da-da-da, it sounded like maybe you've forgotten how to do blah, blah, blah in Spanish, right? So give specific feedback to speakers, including suggestions for expanding language. Like someone in the group might remember, oh, you know what? We know how to do words like first, then, next, and afterwards. That would have really helped what we were saying if we had used that, right? Those sequencing words. Make sure that before they go into the room, they know what they are expected to do, what they will produce or be able to say or do when they come back to the main room. And so you're going to tell them exactly how or what will happen when they come back together in the main room, how they will be held accountable. Will you be randomly calling on 2 people to do some model conversations for the class so you can get a feel for how it went since you couldn't listen to every room? What is it that will they have to report out if they were in a room giving a survey to each other? Will they have to report out on their findings? What is it that they will have to do when they come back to the main room? And then make sure that there is a specific and appropriately short time limit. So I know one of the things we talked about is how it's really hard to get breakout rooms to work with year one. Year one tasks are short and tiny, like the breakout room time limits that you can impose aren't even short enough for most breakout room tasks that they could do in a year one class. So you almost would send them to breakout rooms and then tell them, you're going to see right away a countdown clock that you're coming back because I'm going to end the room as soon as I click the button, and you'll have 60 seconds to finish the task and you're going to be brought back to the main room. If they have too much time, that tends to be where we start seeing them just evolve into English and not engaging in productive behaviors because they've exhausted everything they're capable of doing in the language with the particular task you gave them. And they don't yet have the skills, if they are a year one student, for example, to have much of a follow-up kind of unplanned personal conversation in Spanish or French to keep going with that. So I would recommend short. If they beg for more time, that's a good sign. Let them beg for more time. It's better to have it slightly shorter than they needed than the other way around. This goes back to some things we talked about earlier. So some of the ways to get them talking would be a show and tell. If they are more novice, you might need to give them some sentence frames. You might tell them your homework, your asynchronous assignment for today. And I know one of the issues we're having is that somehow students have come under the impression that once they turn off Zoom, school is done. Even though when they were in school, most of them realized they still had homework. But their asynchronous work for the day is to find the thing that they're going to bring to talk about, and they're going to make sure that they can use the sentence frames to say all the things they need to say about that thing. If they need to complete the sentence frame ahead of time, they are welcome to do that. Is that true interpersonal? No. Is it a stepping stone to eventually interpersonal? Yes. And we'll talk about something that can be done once they're in their breakout rooms, sharing their show and tell to help add a little bit more spontaneity, right? Add a little bit more to it so that there's at least a component of spontaneity if they needed the help of a sentence frame or two or whatever. It could be a favorite object. It could be a pet. It could be something that is, and then a characteristic that they know how to talk about. Something found in the kitchen. Now that could be tricky because they'll probably have to look up new words, right? But if they're a little bit more proficient in the language, it could be that their sentence frames include naming the object and then saying what it's primarily used for, even if that's as simple as saying what food item it's used for or used with. Would you rather? Some of you have been in programs before where we did that just as a fun connecting activity. Well, once students can answer basic questions and maybe express some basic kind of connected ideas to explain why, you can ask them to do some would you rather activities, right? Like the ones some of you have done with me earlier. Would you rather, they don't necessarily know all these words, but just pretend, would you rather fly or read minds? Would you rather have a dog or a cat for a pet? Would you rather, you can just fill those in with a bunch of options. Would you rather travel by plane or by boat? And so that can help get them talking, because now they're basically talking about themselves, which is pretty much one of their favorite topics. So that's another way to be successful. This could be done in breakout rooms or in the main room. 20 questions. You might need to provide questions or have the class brainstorm possible questions, or give them question frames for novice. Is it blank? Does it blank? But if someone in the class thinks of an object or brings an object to the next class meeting, the rest of the class or the rest of the group in the breakout room has 20 questions to try to identify that object. So the person who brought the object doesn't know what questions are going to be asked. So there is that air of spontaneity, even if students might have prepared a list of kind of typical questions ahead of time. So it's kind of that guided interpersonal, because they get to prepare a little bit, right? But when the moment hits, the person who brought the object has to listen to each question. They don't know what order they'll be in. They have to interpret them. If they don't understand the question, they have to ask for clarification. Then they have to answer the question. The people listening and asking the questions have to kind of take in all that information. And then eventually they're going to have to start coming up with a response of what they think the item is. So another idea would be to probably give them, make sure they only bring items that the class knows how to say. Right? Because otherwise it's going to be an exercise in frustration, because even if they figure out what it is in their minds, they're not going to be able to then say, is it a da-da-da? And, they won't be able to get to that final moment. For your more advanced classes, I'll give you a copy of this slide deck, but this slide deck actually goes to a list. They're not all that great, but that's actually a link to what are called kind of like novel questions, as in new, interesting, unthought of, perhaps, things that kids can debate about. This is really good for giving them opportunities to state an opinion and then justify it. Is cereal soup? There's some others too. Is a hot dog a sandwich? Is a burrito a sandwich? There's a few there. I don't think they're all that good, but they can be some ways to get some more advanced conversations going that you might find interesting with your learners. You can have your class administer surveys to each other within their breakout rooms. If each of them gets a different variation of the question, for example, for year one, you can easily do a survey with things like, do you like swimming? And then it's a sentence frame, right? Do you like, insert the blank? Do you like dancing? Do you like reading? Do you like singing? Do you like da-da-da? So you make sure, and you can have students arrange this for themselves once they get in their breakout rooms. You can take the lead and decide on who the groups are and tell each kid in the group what they're going to do. But when they're in their breakout room, they're only going to ask their question. They're going to need to note the responses of everybody. And then you'll probably want to have them track those responses and share out both in the breakout room and then in the main room how the class did. That is also a guided interpersonal, because they know what their own question is. They don't automatically know what question everybody else in the group is asking. And so they have to listen to the other members of the group in order to respond, because they don't want to inaccurately represent what they like to do or don't like to do, for example. There are lots of different kinds of survey questions, but did anyone want to jump in with any ideas kind of related to these, or any questions about any of these? Okay. We're going to try this one right now. This is a tool called Wordwallnet. Well, we're not really going to try it because it's all in French. And so I think only Nick and I would be able to participate, but I will model it for you. This is one of many activities you can create at Wordwall.net. For those of you who've used Flippity with me, it's very similar to Flippity. The one thing I would say, it's probably a little bit easier to set up than Flippity is. But Flippity.net is an add-on to Google Sheets that allows you to take data in a Google Sheet and create all kinds of different activities and games and things with it. Wordwall.net does the same thing. It allows you to basically tell it what kinds of things you want to input, and it will create activities based on that. This is just one of many kinds of activities you can create. You can create puzzles, word searches, a really not interpersonal communication at all, but a whack-a-mole game. I didn't share it here because it's not at all interpersonal communication, but essentially if you have a structure you're trying to get them to practice, it's really good for structures. Maybe for concepts, you would input all that information into Wordwallnet, and then whack-a-mole is kind of like a carnival game. So what it does is you have to, there's these little things that there's like a hill with holes in it, like they're gophers or something. They're mole. Mole is a type of little ground animal. They pop up. If it's the right answer to the question, or it fits the category, there could be a category at the top and it fits the category, you want to whack it. If you hit the wrong one, you lose points. But if you hit the right one, you get the right ones, you get points. And it gets harder and harder, and it has levels, and so on. I know there's like some for verbs in French, but there's also some for Spanish, and you can create your own. So what this one is, though, this one's the spinning wheel, and I really like it for interpersonal communication. And of course, you could make the prompts easier. These are a little more advanced, but essentially, you spin the wheel, it brings you to a topic, or in this case, a category. And so this tells them their topic, vous devez organiser des vacances ensemble, où allez-vous? So it says you need to work together to organize, set up kind of your travel plans, your vacation plans. So where are you all going to go? And so as a group in the breakout room, they would actually kind of spontaneously have a conversation in French to come together around where it is that they are going to go. Right? So they're going to have to negotiate preferences around mountains, ocean, forest, desert, fly or not fly. Is it close, or does it take a long time to get there? How much, is it somewhere we want to spend a lot of time? They're going to have all of those conversations, in order to do that. So now let me try to get it to spin again. There we go. Spin it. And then in theory, it should come up with a different one. So, but we'll see, because sometimes, I don't have that many. Oh, good, it did. Tell us a bit about what you do during the weekend, right? So these are, this is a topic you could, of course, change it to much, much simpler questions, right? And put those questions in the word wall. Here are kind of my pro tip instructions for you if you're going to try this in breakout rooms. Create the activity, get the link to it. I have already tested this to make sure it will work, because I was like, what if multiple people hit the link at the same time? Because what you're going to do is you're going to put the link in the chat, and you're going to tell basically all the students, grab this link, open it in Chrome, come back to Zoom, right? So they've opened it in Chrome, they come back to Zoom, you put them into their breakout rooms, and then one student in each room, only one, but they all have it open, so it should be very fast. One student in each room is going to go back to their Chrome browser and share their screen so that they can all in the room, they can see the spinning wheel, right? And every room will be able to do that at the same time. So that's what I would recommend if you're going to do that with your learners, if that makes sense. Okay. Let's go back to full screen. Some other ideas, and these are ideas kind of built on activities we do in class. So pick one new thing to try. Actually, out of everything we're saying today, please only pick one thing to try. It's overwhelming otherwise. But maybe some of these ones that I'm talking about here aren't even that new. So you know how earlier we were talking about if students have some of these kind of sentence frame conversations where they're not really quite ready for a full interpersonal conversation that's totally spontaneous, or another example of these kind of guided conversations, instead of you providing the sentence frames, a lot of times we have them go to an activity in their textbook, or we project the activity to them where it says partner A is going to ask the question based on the picture and partner B is going to answer the question, right? One way to then take that to the next level and help build in some spontaneity is to add a question to that conversation. So if it's pictures of places around town, and partner A is supposed to ask, where are you going? And partner B looks at the picture and says, I'm going to the store. That's not interpersonal communication. Why? Frankly, both people already know the answer to that question. They have it right in front of them. So it's not a true conversation. They're not accomplishing anything other than just practicing saying language out of their mouths. So to help add a little bit more to the communication aspect, you would then have the first partner after, where are you going? I'm going to the store. With whom? With my sister, right? Or when? tomorrow, right? They don't know which of those questions are going to be asked. And because they don't know which one's going to be asked, it adds that layer of spontaneity to it. It also helps keep those conversation or those question words coming up over and over and over again, because we do see that students tend to have trouble asking questions. And that's because they don't get enough opportunities to be the people asking questions. But if we build it in by having them add a question to those structured practice conversations, it can help a lot. You could do hot potato in Zoom. So a lot of us play hot potato with our students. I used to do it where like each student in a group would have a picture of a different place in the town. They would stand in a circle. And when I gave the signal, they would look around the group, the first person who was going, and pick you have the church. Okay, I'm going to say Pierre is going to the church. And the person with the picture of the church is like, no, he's not. Pierre's not going to the church. He's going to and they look around the group and find someone with a different picture of the school. And the person with the school is like, no, he's not going to the school. He's going to the da-da-da. You can do that in Zoom if the students have access to paper and markers. If you can tell them either the day of or preferably prepared in advance, so you're not losing that really valuable instructional time during your synchronous meetings. Hey, these are the groups you're going to be in. Each of you needs to, work it out, like who's going to draw what pictures, bring it to Zoom. It has to be dark and big enough for you to hold up to the camera so that they can see who has what. And then they can participate in those verbal hot potato games. There is a way to replicate this in writing, almost like text messaging, where you have them do a shared Google Doc and each student has a different font color so that you can see it better. You might need to give some guidance for this conversation, but they would actually go on the Google Doc, asking questions and answering them just spontaneously, not worrying too much about, what am I thinking of? About being accurate necessarily, but really just trying to have that conversation as if they were texting. You definitely want an engaging topic. You want there to be a time limit. You may want to consider having each student submit 1 to 3 possible questions for that topic in advance, just so you can kind of check them over. You want to know that they're going to be capable of continuing that conversation by having some questions to ask as follow-up questions. And also, by the way, this is something you can do anytime. If you're concerned that students are using translators to complete their work, this is not as much for interpersonal speaking, obviously, as it is for presentational writing. But if you're having them write a project, right? You're having them do some kind of open-ended writing task and you're worried that they're going to Google Translate and then just copying and pasting everything into a Google Doc. I don't know if you realized you can watch the editing history so that you can spot whenever they just suddenly copy and paste a whole blab of text. I put a link here in the video, in the slides, and I will give you the slide link. That actually shows you how you can use an add-on, which I have also. I don't have a Google Doc open. It's an add-on called Draftback. And what it does in Google Docs, when you click the add-on, it shows you a little movie of the editing in real time. And then you can share that if needed with others, to have that conversation with the students about, why it's really important that they do their own work. So it could be helpful here too. Really, the key is for them, they shouldn't have time to go plunk things into the translator and respond, because they should be going so quickly, and you need to keep it short also to prevent this, that they shouldn't have time to. But if you're worried about it, you could watch the editing history using the Draftback add-on in Google Docs. Whew. You may want to have some randomized conversations when they come back into the main room. I used to do this in my physical classroom all the time. They would have a conversation with a partner as a practice. And then they would, when we came back together as a whole class, I had an app on my iPad that I would use to randomly select 2 people they weren't the people who were together usually, although it was random. Sometimes they got their own partner, but usually they didn't. So now they're talking to someone else in the class, having that conversation again. It definitely is spontaneous because now they're doing it for the whole class, and I can take note of any things that I need to follow up on. If we talked about Wordwall with the conversation wheel, you could use that wheel again in the main classroom. Wheel of names is one way where you can set up to randomly call on people. It will just let you input a class set of names and spin the wheel, and that's who you're going to pick. Flippity is that add-on to Google Slides. It will let you also do a way of picking students, picking groups, picking teams. It'll do all of that based on one class spreadsheet of names. And if you're someone who likes to use an app, there's an app for both iOS and Android called Popsicle Sticks, because so many teachers use Popsicle Sticks to call on students. So they have a Popsicle Sticks app. Obviously, something else they can do when they come back to the breakout room, come back from the breakout room to the main room, is some kind of debrief activity where they share whatever the accountability piece was, share their survey results, talk about what their partner said, and not just sharing their ideas, but showing that they were listening by sharing what their partner or partners talked about or what their ideas or responses were. You might also consider having a self-reflection component on their experience. You could ask them questions, have them rate themselves. How well did they understand their partner or partners? Rate themselves. Rate themselves on how well they personally were understood. Rate themselves on how well they helped maintain the conversation so everybody was successful. Rate themselves or give open-ended answers. What was the hardest or easiest in that conversation? What was the hardest for them? What is a good goal for them going forward based on what happened with those conversations? So other things that are not quite interpersonal, you can use technology to help kind of simulate interpersonal, but it won't be true interpersonal. So a lot of you know you can use Flipgrid. Students can record a piece, then you assign it to the class and they reply to each other with their own video, and they can actually keep doing that. They can lengthen that conversation and keep replying to the same person so that there's this video thread. You can do digital portfolios in Seesaw. That'll work better once you're in the classroom, but I used Seesaw a lot to capture spontaneous interpersonal communication, because one person could record it with a device. There could be 2 people in the conversation, 3 or 4, as long as everybody could be heard on the microphone. And that one person, when they were finished recording, submitted that recording in every student's folder so that everybody had it, and it was submitted to me as well as the teacher. Some practice tools that allow students to record spoken responses include Edgy. Now, normally these would be spoken responses to a text or an image, so it's not quite interpersonal. Padlet, many of you are familiar with Padlet, kind of that digital bulletin board place where people can post ideas and so on. Well, one of the ways they can add something to a Padlet is by recording video or audio. Linked language actually tries to simulate interpersonal communication. I have a sample here. I don't know if we're going to have time for it, but I have a sample that you can do anytime. It's just a little linked activity I created, although please know that it's in French. So if you try it, just say whatever you want in response. But the idea is that you record 1/2 of the conversation ahead of time, and they will actually see a place to listen to what you first start the conversation with, and then a place where they need to click to respond. Then they see the next piece, whatever your follow-up question was, a place for them to respond. And then you can keep that going as long as you want. And you can also decide if students can replay it, if they, and so on, or if they have to respond, totally spontaneously. Extempore is similar to linked, a lot more expensive, but way more features and more control. So better for assessment, for example, if you need to do an assessment and you just can't figure out how to get it done with breakout rooms because it's a little challenging. Extempore may be an option, but it's quite a bit more expensive, sadly. The other thing I recommend you have your students do is talk to their tech. This won't be interpersonal per se, although if they talk to Siri, it actually kind of is. So if they have iPhone devices, they can actually change Siri to French. They can ask Siri questions, and Siri will actually answer them based on how well Siri understood what their question was. And if Siri doesn't understand their French or their Spanish, Siri will tell them that they don't understand. So you can have them talk to their tech and ask, what's the weather like in Paris today in French? They can ask for definitions of things. They can ask how far away something is from somewhere else. They can do all kinds of questions, and that can be a gauge of how well they pronounce things, to the degree that that artificial intelligence designed to understand a native speaker of Spanish or French can understand them. For those who do not have Apple devices, you can actually set the voice typing in Google Docs to any language you want, so that they can turn on the voice typing tool and they can dictate to a Google Doc to see if their pronunciation results in an accurate transcription of what they said. So that can be really helpful to help improve your students' pronunciation, which, as we know, is an important key both to their reading comprehension and to, of course, how well they are understood in a conversation. Whew. Any thoughts or ideas or next steps for you, or things you'd like to try, or questions that you have?
Nicole, you mentioned you were talking about Wordwall and Flippity, and then you mentioned, I think, 2 other apps. I didn't get which ones those were.
Oh, sure. Let me do one thing very quickly first, because I promised you the slide deck and then I forgot to give it to you all. That's the slide deck. It's in the chat now and you can save it to your Google Drive. And let's back up. There's a lot of them and they're in the slide deck. Let me go up one. So Wheel of Names is pretty much just a random participation wheel. So where you would put students' names in, kind of like that conversation wheel, but when it spins, it's just going to have names in it. Now, in theory, you could put anything you want in it. You could make a conversation wheel there. It doesn't know if it's names or not, right? I don't know what its character limit is, but, and then Flippity, you heard about. If you have an iOS or Android mobile device, you can put the Popsicle Sticks app on there, and it's essentially another way to randomize how you call on students. You would have to input all your students' names, and then it lets you, randomly select students. And random selection is a really important feature of engaging learners, of really getting a more accurate picture of how well students understand a concept, an idea, or how well they're able, in this case, to participate in a conversation. Because if you only have the volunteers, it can give you that mistaken sense of, cool, it was a total success, everybody got it, right? Because the volunteers are more likely to be the people who are like, I got this. When you do random participation, whatever strategy you use to randomize it, it gives you a much more accurate picture of where the successes are in terms of what students are grasping and understanding and able to do, and where their challenges are. Was that the slide you were thinking of?
Yes, that's the yeah.
Perfect.
I missed a couple, so I was wondering. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Any other questions or thoughts?
Nicole?
Yeah.
Did you say that Flippity is on a Google Doc add-on?
No, Flippity is a Google Sheets add-on.
Oh, Google Sheets. Okay.
So it would require you to actually input like the student names or the vocabulary words and, whatever it's going to be into columns in Google Sheets. And then you run the add-on and choose which activity you'd like to do. For names, if you're doing it with names, it will do a wheel, like if you want to select that way, but it will also allow you to put students in pairs, randomly, teams, or groups.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, I haven't done that
those are, it has many templates, but those are like 4 of the things you can do with just doing names.
Okay. Well, these days I have a student teacher.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, and what she does is she uses a breakout room quite a bit. And at the same time, they give them a link for the Padlet.
Yes.
So in the breakout room, they have to record their own conversation.
I love it.
That way we know that they are working instead of, because we can't check everybody.
No. And the cool thing is because Padlet has its own record feature, it probably works pretty well. Like even if only one of them hits record and then the 2 of them are talking and it captures both of the audio, hopefully. You know what I mean? Not just the kid who had the Padlet open and clicked record, but also hopefully the other person.
Use a vocoder and attach the file later on the Padlet.
Yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's a great idea.
Yeah.
Okay. Hopefully, like I said, one of the things I said really early on, if there was anything new to you at all, you might only want to focus on your favorite new thing because that's the one you're probably in a good place for in terms of trying it out. Right? So pick one new thing. One. Or it might be something that you're like, oh my gosh, I used to do that. Why did I ever stop? It's not so new. Right? But the idea isn't that you do all the things, right? It's that you pick the one thing that you really feel like is going to have the most impact for you and your learners.
Right.
Okay. All right.
Right.
I'm going to stop this recording